Today's question is why? Why does the world need Unitarian Universalism? Years ago, 10 or 12 years ago, Jenny Corder, who was then moderator of the UUA board, asked this question at a workshop. Dang-nabbit, there's another sermon I had to write. But as a Toastmaster, my first question was to redirect and answer a different question. Why do I need UUism? Well, let me tell you, I need a place to question everything, even if I don't expect answers. I need a place to safely be relaxed agnostic. Don't have too many answers, not too worried about it either. Maybe I'll find someone else like me. And I need the affirmation of my entire fabulous self. I had left the Presbyterian Church as a teenager and wandered for a decade before I was ready to find this faith community. You might say that I was in a religious shipwreck. I was anti-church, but still wanted to be part of the institution. When I walked into First Unitarian Church in Dallas, I knew that I was home. So that's my answer in a nutshell. As for you, why do you need Unitarian Universalism? Why? While you ponder that, why does the world, why does the country, why does Texas need our good news? Does Tarrant County need our UUism? Does Fort Worth need our message? Fairmont and Ryan Place neighborhoods, South Hempel Heights and Jennings May, Berkeley Place, Morningside, do they need UUism? One part of my answer is that our 7 principles have been under siege. The inherent worth and dignity of every person, well, between various bathroom bills, chipping away at civil rights, transgender persons being murdered, not everyone's being respected. Justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. Refer to my previous answer. Acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. We do okay with each other, but what about the general society? Have you listened to a talk show lately? What about social media? If someone posts a provocative article, read the comments, or better yet, don't read the comments. 4, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. With our federal, state budgets for education, with our agencies, federal agencies in a disarray, there is continuing cause for alarm. 5, the right of conscience and use of democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. Have you seen the news lately? And there was that election thing last year. The goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. Sometimes it feels like there are people, corporations, and governments who are working against that goal. 7, the respect for interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. Sometimes I feel a little lonely in my corner of the web. Here's some more answer. We need to be a home for religious liberals of all theologies, for atheists and pagans and religious liberal Christians and those in between and on the edges. And we need to be a voice for liberal religion to add our perspective to community dialogue. We need to be there for people who are marginalized. Black Lives Matter needs our support because racism is still alive and Jim Crow has gone high-tech. Me Too movement reminds us that sexism is alive and well. LGBTQ people, our population. Coming out happened so much earlier than back in my day, which has brought in a whole new range of issues. But the suicide and substance abuse rates still run 2 to 3 times that of the general population. Homeless youth, 40% is the figure I see most often. 40% of homeless youth living on the streets have fled their homes for their personal safety or been kicked out because of who they are. There was a news study last fall that of gay and lesbian and bisexual transgender teens they're twice as likely to be incarcerated. And you know they have extra issues while incarcerated. Environmental justice, you know we have some work to do there too. I want to tell a story about how First Church got to be I knew that First Church was welcoming, but it reminds us when we had an 8th grader taking the OWL class our whole lives. It's a wonderful curriculum. This 8th grader, remember what, 8th grade, about 13 years old? He learned while taking OWL that being gay or lesbian did not just mean that you sold donuts on Sunday morning. Did I say he was 8th grade? But how do we build a church to be there for our neighbors? You're doing a pretty good job on stewardship, so I'll save that for another sermon. Instead, let's consider what North Texas congregations could be and do. We first need to figure out that be, then what could we do? So you got some background this morning. NTOC started in 1969 by building affordable housing, and it used to be North Texas Association of Unitarian and Universalist Societies. You can see why we changed the name. I used to tell people the acronym was more accurately pronounced Nut House. I'd like to say it was founded with noble aims of affordable housing, but I'm sorry. There was an informal group of congregations, and one of the people, the leaders, had a friend who knew about this federal program, but he needed a nonprofit so he could access the money. We were a front. But it was for a good purpose with good results. Rabel Place was HUD's ideal. We were the model that was referenced across the country. We can be proud of that. We had on-site healthcare workers, social worker, parenting classes, GED class. It was the first integrated housing apartment complex in North Texas. And I'm told that ours was one of 2 projects that embodied the legislation or the ideals behind those laws. We can be proud of that. About 15 years ago, we got a good offer on the property. We took the money and ran, invested at just the right time. We started off with $2.5 million. We've taken out a little over $2 million, and we now are sitting close to $3 million. I think we did well. But what are we to do now? What is our mission? What should be our focus? We've got some work to do, as our mission statement is rather vague, and there's more energy than there is direction. So at this month's board meeting, we'll start by reviewing our vision statement, answering these 2 questions. If we are successful, how will North Texas be different in 25, 50, or 100 years? You can use that with other organizations as well. That's in question. And in 8 words or less, I'm going to limit people, what could NTOC be? These answers will form our mission statement, though we might not change from the current one. A more just, loving, and sustainable world. So what does that mean for us? To be just. It calls us to be anti-oppression, to fight the isms and phobias in society. We've made some progress in our own institutions, but there's still work to do. Justice work does take both social action and community service. The latter is helping neighbors in need, while the former, we work at reducing that need. It takes both. Social action can mean running a marathon, because changing attitudes and laws can take a long time. Community service can provide immediate reward because we have grateful people. But if we don't work on why the people are needing the housing and the food and the health care, we could be doing this same work forever and ever. City Square Dallas is a large organization that has an approach I like. They do work on both. The sign on the door says, "We fight the causes and effects of poverty." I like that. Loving. And I'm not talking about a Pollyanna-like embrace of everybody or mushy sentiments you'll see on a cheap Valentine. But love rooted in our principles. When friends or neighbors are being abused or in danger, sometimes we need to be fierce in that love, not timid. Pride Parade this October in Fort Worth, right here, there was a protester who had gotten the front row of people riled up, and they were yelling at her and shouting, and I went up to them and said, "Don't, be quiet, don't argue with her, that's just what she wants, don't argue with her, that just encourages her." And they all got quiet, and she looks at me, and I'm supposed to do something. Oops. So I sang, "This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine." Everybody joined in with me. Before the end of the first verse, she had given up and walked away. We shut down a protester. Best yet, I showed young adults how to do this. There's a quote from Dr. King that I like. "Power without love is reckless and abusive, and love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love." Sustainable. Well, caring for planet Earth should be a no-brainer, I would think. A few answers to that other question, and could accomplish this. One, we could be a beacon of liberal religion. The liberal religion, words that sometimes people are scared to use. We need to let people know about our good news and our life-saving messages. It is life-saving. But a big ad campaign may not be money well spent, especially if we have congregations that are struggling. Visitors come in a few at a time, and if they don't see a healthy congregation, they're less likely to stay. Besides, what is the most common reason people give for joining a congregation? Somebody invited them. So you have an assignment. Yes. We could be a catalyst for the growth of Unitarian Universalism. College is a time of exploration for many people, and I would love for us to invest in campus ministry. There are several models with a range of cost, but congregational support is also important, not just money. We could also help seminaries and theological students, important because there's an imminent wave of retiring ministers, and we're already seeing a shortage of clergy. We don't have enough ministers. We could be a catalyst for social justice. You know, strong social action can be good advertising. We got our start from housing, and that's how we got our endowment fund. Building another Rainbow Place may not be feasible, but we could look at helping specific populations like homeless youth. Maybe we partner with another organization that knows what they're doing and build a facility, maybe in Tarrant County, maybe even go up to Denton County and build one, because we have one in Dallas. We have a wonderful tool we could use, Our Whole Lives. OWL is an abstinence, we know abstinence only doesn't work, and OWL is one of the best curriculum options in the country. I say it is inclusive, comprehensive, and non-judgmental. We could be teaching it at community centers, private schools, We'll never get in the public school with that. But in the private schools, community centers to young folks, maybe older adults, there's a seniors version coming out next year, or this year. Let's go teach all. It's what we know and are good at. Finally, what if we were a unified body and recognized body of servant leaders? Servant leadership is where people are more focused on what they bring to and give to an organization than what they take from it. Maybe we could be one of those. There might be another sermon on that someday. With these possibilities in mind, let's look at some numbers. Unitarian Universalists are a tiny minority in this country, but like the Quakers, we have had impact far beyond our numbers. About 200,000 members, or one place I saw it said 211,000, including children. That makes us about 2/3 of 1/10 of 1% of our population. Numbers in North Texas run a little lower, with a bit less than half of that 1/10 of a percent. A little over 3,000 instead of what would be closer to 5,000. In Tarrant County, there are about 550 UUs, while the national average would bring us closer to 1,300. But imagine with me, if we had Tulsa's numbers, we had the percentage in Tulsa, there would be 5,000 just here in the Fort Worth area. There would be more than 20,000 throughout North Texas. There's room for more than one or two healthy congregations in Fort Worth. Now, I will say I am not for growth just to be big, but to strengthen our work and our message. Well, now, what happened in Oklahoma? We can't duplicate it. They captured lightning in a bottle. But if we were anywhere close to that size, we could better afford to teach all at different locations, to build housing for homeless youth, and to let more people know of our good news, people who could use a spiritual compass. Are you with me? Finally, I'm going to close by asking, whose church is this? Because this is not your church. This is the church of the folks who started this congregation and saw it through the early days. This is the church of Reverend Robert Rabel, who came from Dallas in 1946 and helped start the congregation in Fort Worth. The charter members, Mary and Harry Evans, were members when I joined in Dallas. They had moved to Dallas and were members when I joined 30 years ago. This is their church. This is the church of Daniel Christian Limbaugh, who came over here on the train more than 100 years ago and gave lectures in a hotel ballroom. This is the church of James Billings and Mary Ward Billings. Don't remember them? No? Leaders of the Universalist Church in Texas more than 100 years ago. Did you realize that? Based in Hyco, Texas. Hyco, Texas. In 1889, during the heyday, 16 Universalist ministers from Texas signed in at a meeting. This is their church. This is the church of Theodore Clapp, who almost 200 years ago helped build our congregation in New Orleans. This is the church of Quillen Shin, Universalist circuit rider, who a little over 100 years ago helped start churches all over the South in one 3-year period. He did 15,000 miles on horseback. This is their church. Today, you are building the church for future generations. Not just your grandchildren, but your great-great-great-great-grandchildren and their peers. So I ask you, what will Westside Church look like in 120 years? Would you like to sing?